Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video I'm bringing to you my spoiler-free review of Lizzy's story by Stephen King, which is my fourth Stephen King book. I've read It, Cujo and Insomnia by him before, and I have reviews for both Cujo and Insomnia already out in the channel. So if you want to know my thoughts in them, I'll link the videos down in the description so that you can check them out if you are interested. This one was a very different story compared to all the other three books that I've read by him so far, but it is also just as huge as most of the books that I've read by him so far. I should say that I did not enjoy this book, but I was very much staggered while reading it because it was brilliant and it was very unlike anything that I've read so far in my life. So without any further ado, let's get into the various parts of the review right away. Before getting into the review, I just want to give away some of the trigger warnings for this book, and they are self-harm, child abuse, sexual assault, depression, death of a loved one, and many more such things. So if you're going to read this book, please do keep them in mind. Now let's start with the plot. Here we follow our main character Lisey Landon, who's the wife of this very popular and successful writer named Scott Landon, and the book starts nearly 2 to 3 years after the death of Scott, and because of this Lisey is living her life all alone. She is heavily depressed and she is always feeling the absence of Scott in her life because they were married at a very young age and they did not have children also, because of which both of them have lived their lives together and the only companion that they've had throughout their lives is the other one. As we go through the story, we start to see the past life of Lisey as well as Scott. Even though it's Lisey's story, most of this book deals with the backstory of Scott and what has happened to him in his past life. At the same time, we also get a very deep look into their marriage and how they've lived through all these years. It's not like Scott became popular even before he got married. They both got married in the very initial stages of Scott's career, and only after their marriage he blew up and became a very popular author, and he also started making such great works in his life. He has a huge fan following, and because of this also he has faced a lot of problems because of some very passionate fans, to say in the most decent way. How Lisey has dealt with all these things, staying in the shadow of God throughout her life without being intimidated by him in their marriage, is the actual plot of this book. And there are also so many other things which are going on in the later half of the story that I don't want to reveal because of the spoiler-free format of the video. Talking about the characters, apart from Lisey and Scott, we also follow some of the side characters like Lisey's sisters Amanda and Darla, and Scott's father and elder brother while we see about his childhood. But I should say that more than any of the other characters in this one, the story is mostly about Scott. Even though the title of the book is Lisey's story, I was only able to see more of Scott's story than Lisey's story throughout the book, and I don't think it's a bad thing also, because we have a lot more things to dig about Scott's life and know a lot more about him, and he's the reason why Lisey lives now also. How both of them have helped each other and been the other's half throughout their life is really nice to read about here. Another thing which I liked about the characterizations inside this book is that both of the main characters whom we follow here are completely fleshed out. It is very easy to see what kind of people they are and how they have lived their life because of all the things that the author shows. They have definitely not lived an easy life. They have had a lot of hardships, and there are even certain kinds of communications that they develop because of their marriage and because of the fact that they have lived all through these years together. For example, both of them don't use the F word, instead they use the word smug, and there are so many other things which is very particular to them alone that they use while talking with each other. All those things made me feel like both of these people actually exist and they are a human couple rather than just two characters. So after the world building inside this book, I should say that the best part about this book is both the main characters. Even though Lisey's story is the title of the book, I personally think that Scott is just as equally important as Lisey for the composition of this book. Next, moving on to the world building, which is my most favorite part about this book. Okay, usually when it comes to world building in all of the other Stephen King books that I've read so far, it is not that clear for me to see what he's trying to visualize in front of my eyes, but in this book it was not that case at all, because I was able to see each and everything that he was talking about. Again, it was way too descriptive, but it helped me see all the things that he is showing me, because the story just doesn't happen within a fixed timeline. It happens across decades if you ask me, and the way in which he shows each and every time period properly because of his descriptions was very easy for me. It was daunting to read all those descriptions each and every time, but it helped me visualize the kind of world that these characters have lived in over the years, because they have not lived in the same kind of time and age in the 60s and in the 2000s. So showing the time difference through his writing, adding that as a layer inside the world building, was a really good thing for me to read. Apart from that, there is also the supernatural world which we get to see in the second half of the book compared to the first half. and the way in which he shows that second world to us is very, very phenomenal. Okay, I have not read any other setup that is as eerie and spooky as that world so far in my life, and I should say that while reading that chunk of the book, I felt a lot uncomfortable at multiple times, and I loved that feeling, because only if the writing had been that great and only if the world was that well built by the author, I would have been able to feel all those things, and I was able to feel all those things, and it made me uncomfortable at times. Even though that's not the best feeling to have, I think the author just succeeded immensely by building the world in that eerie and spooky a way such that he made me feel it to the core. Next, talking about the writing, I don't think I even need to talk about Stephen King's writing, because we all know that he has this very peculiar type of writing style in which he is very good in writing stories within stories, and that was the same here also. Okay, we have this overarching story which shows us the life of Lisey after the death of Scott. At the same time, we go into a lot more sub stories inside the main story, showing us how these characters have lived and who are these characters because of all the things that they've gone through in their lives. Especially Scott's character and Scott's story inside Lizzie's story for me was very, very interesting, because it is a very dark story. It is something which I have not seen in any other media before, and the kind of relationships that he shows inside that particular story of Scott was very, very dark and also super true for me, because I know that such kind of relationships exist between people across the world, and it is not something everyone feels ready to talk about with anyone who's new in their life, even if that person is a very close and integral part of their life, because that is something which is very dark and private when it comes to their life, and exposing that to a person might be very difficult. The way in which the author made Scott express his story to Lisey using the way in which he chose to do it was really, really nice. It did not confuse me also, because all these different parts of the stories that were told inside the main story of the book were very distinguishable, and I was not confused between all the things that were happening across various timelines and various places inside the book. So in that way, even though the writing is descriptive, as I said before, and very, very slow, so even if the writing is very descriptive, as I said before, I think that amount of description is necessary, because it made me help distinguish between all these things that were going on inside huge story properly and clearly understand what was happening during each and every part of the book. And at last, talking about the pacing, I was pretty sure that this book was going to be slow, because I experienced the same thing with all the other 3 Stephen King books that I've read before this one also. I know that they will be heavily descriptive, and I know that they will be very, very slow, and I'm expecting the same for any of the other books that I'm going to read by him in the future also, and I don't care. Okay, it's not a big problem for me, because even if the pacing is slow, but if the author writes to a story in a very engaging way and makes me feel the place in which the story is happening, it is a thing which just engages me with the book a lot more compared to a fast pacing. And I think the slowness of this book made me feel the story properly and feel where it was happening and see all those things and feel all those things those characters were going through. And just as I said before, I felt that discomfort inside the other world that the author has written. And I think one of the main things which influenced all those feelings for me was the slowness of the book, because just because I was sitting through all those things, I was able to experience them properly without just rushing through them. Even though it clouded my mind a lot and brought my mood down in the scale, I should say that it was completely worth it, because I was able to experience the book as such, and that was only possible because of the pacing. So when it comes to the rating, I rated Lizzy's story 4 out of 5 stars, and I am very glad that I read this book. It has been sitting on my shelf for over 3 years now, and I don't know why I have put it off for so long. I have a few more Stephen King books on my shelf also, and I think I'll be reading them faster since I liked this one a lot more. If you read Lizzy's story, please do let me know down in the comments your opinions on it and what you liked and did not like about the book. I know that I'm fairly new to Stephen King because I've not read most of his books, and I've seen in the comments of my previous videos that many people who have read more of his works give me some recommendations of where I can go and what I can read next. So if you do have something like that, please do feel free to let them down in the comments. And if you did like watching this video and found it useful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.